Your translator tricked you. The words came from somewhere low, too low to belong to any of the 13 men standing around the long table. Dong Hyun-baek looked up slowly from the contract in front of him. His eyes, the kind that had made grown men apologize without knowing why, swept the room once. Twice. Then they landed on the boy. He was small, maybe 7 years old, dark-skinned, with tight coils of hair and eyes so wide and serious they looked like they belonged on someone 3 times his age. He was wearing a blue dinosaur t-shirt. He had crayon on his left thumb, and he was standing right there in the middle of a meeting that had taken Dong Hyun 4 months to arrange, a meeting that 3 rival organizations had already tried to destroy, staring up at him like he had every right in the world to be there. Dong Hyun didn't move. He didn't speak. He was very, very good at not reacting. One of his men, Baek Tae-sung, his head of security, a man who had once stood in front of a moving truck without blinking, actually took a step backward. The boy did not move. "Mister," the boy said again, louder this time, because clearly the first time had not been enough. "Your translator tricked you." He told them a different number. A much bigger number. I heard him. The room went completely silent. Not the usual kind of silence, the polite kind or the professional kind. This was the silence that falls when everyone in a room suddenly realizes that something irreversible has just happened, and none of them know yet what it means. Dong Hyun-baek set down his pen. He looked at the boy. Then he looked at his translator, a man named Yeol Ga-won, who had worked for him for 2 years, and who was now standing near the window with a very specific kind of stillness. The stillness of someone who has just been found out. "Say that again," Dong Hyun said. His voice was quiet. It was always quiet when something important was happening. The boy pointed, no hesitation, no shaking, directly at Yeol Ga-won. "He told the other men that you said the number was 300 million. But you said 150. I was sitting outside the door. The door was not closed all the way. I speak Korean." One of the men across the table, one of the men who was supposed to be signing this deal, slowly pushed his chair back. Dong Hyun raised one hand. Just one hand, barely lifted, palm out. The man stopped. "Where is your mother?" Dong Hyun asked the boy. Not because he was angry, not because he was about to remove the boy from the room. He asked because the boy had just potentially saved him from the single most expensive and dangerous misunderstanding of the last 6 years of his life, and Dong Hyun-baek was not the kind of man who ignored things like that. The boy pointed again, this time toward the hallway. "She works here," the boy said. "She is the new cleaning staff supervisor. She does not know I came in. Please do not tell her I was in here. She will be very upset with me." A beat of silence. Then, and this surprised even Dong Hyun himself, the corner of his mouth moved. Just barely. It wasn't exactly a smile. It was more like the memory of one. "What is your name?" he asked. "Daryl," the boy said. "But everyone calls me Treasure." "Treasure." Dong Hyun repeated it carefully, the way he repeated everything. "How long have you been sitting outside that door?" "Since you started talking about numbers," Treasure said. "The big ones. I like numbers. My mom says I have a gift. I do not know if it is a gift or if I just pay attention better than other people." Tae-sung made a sound. It might have been a cough. It might have been something else entirely. Dong Hyun stood up from his chair. He was tall, not dramatically tall, but the kind of tall that fills a room when it decides to. He buttoned the middle button of his jacket, which is what he did when he was about to make a decision he had already made 3 seconds ago. He looked at Yeol Ga-won. Yeol Ga-won looked back at him. And in that look, everything was confirmed. Every single thing the boy had said. "Take him," Dong Hyun said to Tae-sung, nodding toward Yeol. Then he looked at the men across the table. "We will resume this meeting in 1 hour. The correct numbers will be reconfirmed." If anyone in this room had prior knowledge of this discrepancy, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The sentence finished itself, somewhere in the space between his voice and the door. The men across the table shook their heads quickly. All of them, almost at the same time. Dong Hyun nodded once. Then he looked down at Treasure again. Treasure was watching him with that enormous, careful gaze. He hadn't moved this entire time. Not once. This child had stood in the middle of one of the most dangerous rooms in the city and had not so much as shuffled his feet. You saved me a significant amount of money, Dong Hyan said. And possibly more than that.
Treasure thought about this.
Will you really not tell my mum? Dong Hyan picked up his pen from the table. That depends entirely on whether she asks me directly. I don't lie when asked directly. Treasure considered this with the gravity of a tiny philosopher. Okay, he said finally. That is fair. He turned and walked back toward the hallway door, unhurried, unafraid, dinosaur t-shirt and crayon thumb, and slipped out as quietly as he had arrived. The room breathed again. Taesung leaned close to Dong Hyan's ear. Boss, he said very low. That child just... I know what he did, Dong Hyan said. Do you want me to find the mother? Dong Hyan was quiet for a moment. He looked at the door the boy had gone through. No, he said. Not yet. Let her finish her work. He sat back down. He straightened his contract. He pressed his fingertips together and waited for the room to settle. But something had shifted, some quiet, invisible thing, and Dong Hyan Baek, who had spent 15 years building walls so precise and so complete that not even memory could get through them, felt it shift. He wasn't sure yet what to do about that. Her name was Tanya. To the 3 people in the world she allowed close enough to use a short name, and she had been in this country for 14 months, which was exactly 14 months longer than she had planned when she first packed her son's clothes into a duffel bag and left a life behind that had been slowly breaking her. She was 28 years old. She had a master's degree in facility operations management that currently lived inside a folder in the bottom drawer of her bedside table, because degrees did not always open the doors that people said they would. She had a laugh that was quick and genuine and surprised people. She had a son who, as of approximately 45 minutes ago, had apparently walked into a high-security meeting of one of the most powerful private business networks in the country and told the boss his translator was lying. Tanya found out the way she found everything out. Too late, but with full clarity. She was in the supply closet on the 3rd floor doing an inventory check when her phone lit up with a message from Treasure's temporary sitter, Mrs. O, who watched Treasure in the staff lounge on days when Tanya was working. I fell asleep. I woke up. Treasure is not here. I checked the hallway. I am so sorry. Please call me. Tanya did not call. She walked, fast, quiet. In that particular way she moved when she was terrified but refusing to become it, back toward the main building wing. She found Treasure in the 2nd floor hallway, sitting against the wall outside a set of very large, very closed doors, eating a granola bar he had produced from somewhere on his person. He looked completely calm. Treasure, she said. Just his name. But the way she said it contained an entire paragraph. He looked up. He assessed her face the way he always did. That quick, clever reading of her that had started when he was barely 4 and had only gotten more accurate since. I did not touch anything, he said. Treasure. I helped, he said. I helped the man with the quiet voice. His translator was lying to him about the numbers. I told him. He said I saved him a lot of money. Tanya crouched down to his level. She took a slow breath. What man? What room? Treasure pointed at the large doors. Everything in Tanya's body went very still. She had been briefed, in her onboarding, about the kind of meetings that happened in those rooms. She had been told, clearly, that staff were to remain on assigned floors during those sessions. She had been given a list of names, just last names, no details, of the parties involved. One of those names was Beck. Even in 14 months, even keeping herself carefully separate from the city's more complicated currents, she had heard that name. Oh, Treasure, she whispered. He was nice, Treasure said, very matter-of-factly. He has a serious face, but his eyes are not mean. I checked. You checked. I always check eyes.
You taught me that.
She had, in fact, taught him that. She regretted it slightly at this particular moment. She pulled him up by his hand, gently, carefully, the way she did everything with him, and was about to walk him straight to the elevator and down to the staff exit when the large doors opened. Dong Hyan Baek walked out. He was not alone. There were 2 men behind him, but Tanya barely processed them because he was looking directly at her. Not searching, not surprised. As if he had known, quite precisely, that she would be standing here. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Treasure looked up at Dong Hyan. Then he looked up at his mother. Then back at Dong Hyan. He had the expression of someone watching something very interesting develop. "You must be his mother," Dong Hyan said. His English was careful and precise, with a slight accent that gave every word a particular weight. "I am," Tanya said. Her voice was steady. She was excellent at steady. "I'm so sorry if he interrupted anything." "He did not interrupt," Dong Hyan said. He corrected. "A beat." "I am aware that does not make it appropriate," he continued, "for a 7-year-old to be in that room. But what he did was significant. And I don't dismiss significant things because they arrived in an inconvenient form." Tanya looked at him. He was not what she had expected from the name alone. She wasn't entirely sure what she had expected. Something harder, maybe. Something more closed. He was closed, she could see that, very, very closed, but it was the kind of closeness that comes from choice, not from absence. There was something behind it. Something that was very much still there. "Thank you," she said carefully. "For not." She glanced at Treasure. "For being kind to him." "He was not afraid of me," Dong Hyan said. And there was something in the way he said it, not proud, not amused, just noting it. Like it was a fact worth recording. "He's not afraid of very much," Tanya said. "For better and for worse." Treasure nodded in confirmation. Dong Hyan looked at the boy for one more moment. Then he reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and produced a small card. He held it out, not to Treasure, but to Tanya. "If anything becomes complicated because of what happened today," he said, "contact that number. My assistant will arrange whatever is needed." Tanya looked at the card. She didn't take it immediately. "Complicated how?" "I dismissed someone today," he said simply. "People who are dismissed sometimes look for explanations. I want to make sure those explanations don't travel in your direction." Tanya understood what he meant. She understood it completely, the way you understand something when you've spent enough time in rooms where words mean 3 things at once. She took the card. "Thank you," she said again. This time it meant something different. Dong Hyan nodded once. He looked at Treasure one last time. "You have very good ears," he told the boy. Treasure beamed. "I know," he said. 3 days passed. Then 5. Then a week. Tanya told herself that was that. A strange moment. A crisis averted. A card she would probably never use tucked into the small zipper pocket of her work bag. She told herself that she was not thinking about it. She was good at telling herself things that were approximately half true. What was actually happening was this. On the day after the meeting, 2 of the building's cleaning contractors quietly lost their access badges without being given a formal reason. 3 days after that, Mrs. O, Treasure's sitter, confided, very nervously, that a man she didn't recognize had been asking questions near the staff entrance about which floors the new supervisor worked on. He hadn't come back after that first day. But the fact that he had come at all lodged itself like a splinter in the back of Tanya's mind. She didn't use the card. Not because she wasn't concerned, but because she had spent the last 3 years learning the very specific and important skill of not reaching for things that weren't hers to reach for. She had reached once, badly, and she still carried the shape of that mistake in the careful distances she kept from people now. Treasure, for his part, had moved on completely. He had a new obsession, Korean math workbooks, which he had found in a second-hand bookshop and which he worked through with a seriousness that slightly alarmed his teacher on the video calls she still did with him 3 times a week. He had also started writing down Korean words in a small notebook he kept in his dinosaur backpack. "Why Korean?" Tanya asked him one evening while she made jollof rice on the small electric stove in their apartment. The rice never came out quite right, but Treasure never complained, which she suspected was its own kind of loyalty. "Because I already know it a little," Treasure said, without looking up from his notebook, "and now I want to know it better. Also, the grammar is interesting. It is like a puzzle, but for talking." Tanya looked at him. "Where did you learn Korean in the first place?" "From the family that lived next to us before. In the old apartment." The grandmother watched me sometimes when you were working late. She taught me counting and colors and some other words. She said I was very fast. Tanya hadn't known this. She filed it away, the way she filed most things about treasure, with a mixture of wonder and the slight, constant panic of a parent who knows they are raising someone they cannot fully keep up with. Treasure, she said. You know I would have learned with you, right? If you'd told me. He looked up. I know, he said. But you were tired. She didn't answer that. She just stirred the rice a little harder. The card appeared in her mind again. She stirred the rice. It appeared again. She added more tomato paste. The following Monday, she was in the middle of a staff rescheduling meeting. One of the other supervisors had called out sick, and the coverage spreadsheet had become a minor disaster, when her manager, a brisk, well-meaning woman named Yunji, knocked on the door of the small office and said, very quietly, there's someone asking for you at the building reception. He says it's about a personnel matter from last week. Tanya went still. Does he have a name? He gave a name, Yunji said. He said Baek Taesung. He says he works for Baek Donghyun. He was very polite, very large. Tanya took exactly 3 seconds to decide. Then she stood up, straightened her badge, and walked to the reception. Taesung was, indeed, very large. He was also, as advertised, very polite. He bowed slightly when she approached, which she had not expected, and he spoke in careful, measured sentences that gave her the impression of someone who had been trained to be precise and had found, over time, that he actually preferred it. Mr. Baek would like to speak with you, Taesung said. At your convenience. Not here. He owns a building, the Hagang Tower on the north side, and he would like to offer you a meeting there. He said to tell you. He paused, as if reading from memory. He said to tell you that he found out something that concerns your safety, and he would prefer to explain it to you directly rather than send it in a message. Tanya studied Taesung's face carefully. She was good at faces. She had learned over years that most people's faces told the truth even when their mouths were doing other things. Taesung's face said, I do not make decisions, but I carry them faithfully. And I believe this one matters. Can he not come here? She asked. He could, Taesung said. But he thought you might prefer somewhere you felt in control of the space. His words. He said he would understand if you brought someone with you. Tanya had nobody to bring. This was one of the loneliest truths of her current life, and she held it quickly, and then set it down. I'll come tomorrow, she said. In the morning. Before my shift. Taesung bowed again. I will tell him. She went back to the rescheduling spreadsheet. She covered 3 shifts and balanced the weekend roster in 40 minutes. She was very focused. She was absolutely not thinking about the meeting. She was very definitely not wondering what he had found out. She thought about it all night. In the morning, she dropped Treasure at Mrs. O's. He went without complaint, which meant he was deeply occupied by whatever puzzle his brain was currently inside, and took the bus to the north side. The Hagang Tower was quieter than she expected. Not small, it was 12 floors of pale stone and wide windows, but calm. Nobody rushed in the lobby. There was a woman at the desk who gave Tanya a visitor's pass and told her the 11th floor and did not make her feel, even slightly, like she didn't belong there. Which, Tanya noted privately, took a specific kind of organizational culture to achieve. Dong Hyun was waiting in a room that was not what she had expected. It wasn't a boardroom. It was a meeting room with a round table, deliberately round, she suspected, and 2 chairs and a tray with tea she hadn't been asked if she wanted, but which turned out to be exactly what she would have chosen if asked. Rooibos with honey. She didn't know how he had known that, and she was not going to ask. He stood when she came in. Not performatively, not the way men stand when they're trying to make an impression. Just as a courtesy, matter of fact and complete. Thank you for coming, he said. You said it was about my safety, she said. She sat down. She held her bag on her lap for exactly 3 seconds and then put it on the floor because holding it made her look like she was bracing for something. Tell me what you found. Something in his expression, already composed, already still, settled by 1 more degree. He respected directness. She could see that. It was almost visible, the way it registered. You'll go on the translator I dismissed. has connections to a group that has been trying to disrupt several of my business arrangements for the past year, he said. He sat down across from her. When he was dismissed, he needed to explain to those connections why the deal he was sabotaging had gone through correctly instead. The only explanation he could give, he paused, was your son. Tanya's hands were very still on the table. He told them a child overheard the conversation and exposed him. Dong Hyan continued. I found this out through my own sources. These people, they are not rational actors, Mrs. They do not respond to logic or proportion. They respond to threats, real or perceived. And a child who can speak Korean, who works in buildings they use, whose mother has access. Stop, Tanya said. Very quiet. Very controlled. He stopped. She pressed her lips together for a moment. She looked at the table. Then she looked at him. How serious. Serious enough that I would not have asked you here if I thought it could be managed another way. What other way did you try? A pause. A real one, not a performance of consideration but actual thought. I dealt with SEOUL directly, he said. That conversation is over. But the people he reported to are separate. I cannot reach them through the same channels. Tanya nodded. Once. She was thinking. She could feel him watching her think, and she found, strangely, that it didn't make her self-conscious. He was not watching her the way people watched when they were judging. He was watching the way people watch when they are actually paying attention. What do you need from me? She asked. I need you to let me arrange a temporary change to your working situation, he said. Nothing permanent, but visible enough that any surveillance on your current location stops producing useful information. She looked at him directly. You want to move me? I want to protect you, he said. And then, immediately, without any softening, which will also protect my interests since the connection leads back through me. I am not pretending this is purely altruistic, but it is also not altruistic. If that makes sense. It made a great deal of sense. More sense, honestly, than she was comfortable with, because it meant he was the kind of person who told you the complicated truth instead of the clean-looking one, and that was harder to keep your distance from. I need to think about it, she said. Of course. I have a son, she said. Every decision I make has another person in it. I know, he said. And the way he said it, not dismissive, not overwarm, just accurate, made her stop for a second. Treasure told you about himself, she guessed. For the first time since she'd met him, Dong Hyan Baek almost smiled. He told me quite a lot, actually. In the approximately 4 minutes between when I asked him his name and when my meeting was due to restart. Tanya closed her eyes briefly. I am so sorry. Don't be, he said. He told me his mother worked very hard. He told me she made the best jollof rice in the entire building, though he admitted he had not tried anyone else's jollof rice in the building, so it was possibly not a fair comparison. A beat. He told me she taught him to check people's eyes to see if they were mean. Tanya opened her eyes. Dong Hyan was looking at her steadily. For what it is worth, he said, I passed. She did not say yes that morning. She went home. She made Treasure his afternoon snack. She sat on the floor of their apartment with her back against the bed and her phone face down in her hands, and she thought. She thought about Dammy, Treasure's father, who had been charming and careful and attentive right up until the moment he wasn't. She thought about herself at 23, so certain she could read people, so certain she had checked the eyes and found them not mean, so completely wrong. She thought about the 3 years after, which had been about survival and clarity and the slow, painstaking work of building a life that fit only her and her son. No extra rooms in it, no open windows, nothing that could be used as an entrance. She thought about Dong Hyan's face when he said, I want to protect you, which will also protect my interests. I am not pretending this is purely altruistic. She thought about that for a long time. Because the thing was, she had been told she was protected before. She had been told it beautifully. In complete sentences, with eye contact, with warmth. And it had been a door that only opened one way. This felt different. And the fact that it felt different was what scared her most. She called her friend Beezy, the one person who qualified as close enough for the short name. Beezy was in another city, working a nursing shift that had already gone 4 hours over, and she answered in the middle of a corridor with the background noise of a busy ward behind her. Tell me the situation. Beezy said, in her no-nonsense way. She was the only person Tanya had met who could strip a problem down to its bones in under a minute. Tanya told her. All of it. The meeting. The card. The translator. The danger. Taesung. The round table and the rooibos tea. When she finished, Beezy was quiet for 3 seconds. He knew you take rooibos with honey, she said. Yes. He knew. Yes. Tanya. I know, Beezy. That's not a surveillance detail. That's attention. Those are two very different things. Tanya pressed her phone harder against her ear. I am aware. Is he? Beezy lowered her voice slightly. Is he the kind of man you run from or the kind you run toward? I don't run toward people. That's not what I asked. Tanya didn't answer. Okay, Beezy said. Protect my godson. Say yes. But keep your eyes open and your bag packed, and if anything feels wrong, one single wrong thing, you call me and I call my cousin, and my cousin calls his people. Your cousin's people are accountants. Highly motivated accountants. They can cause a different kind of damage. Tanya laughed, the kind of laugh that came out before she could catch it, startled and real. I'll call you tomorrow, she said. You'll call me tonight, Beezy said. With updates. She said yes the next morning. Taesung came to her apartment, accompanied by a woman named SEOUL, who was apparently Dong Hyan's logistics coordinator, and who took one look at their apartment and began writing things on a tablet with the focused efficiency of someone who had moved families before and had systems for it. Treasure watched her with deep fascination and asked her 7 questions about the tablet software, which she answered fully and without apparent irritation. The arrangement Dong Hyan had made, a furnished apartment in a residential complex his company managed, on a high floor with a security desk downstairs. A temporary reassignment for Tanya, still facility operations, but for a different building in his portfolio, one that had no connection to the people looking for answers. Treasure's schooling, which was still remote, would not change at all. It's not a cage, SEOUL told her, very practically. You come and go as you want. We don't follow you. We just remove the things that make you easy to find. And in exchange? Tanya asked. SEOUL looked at her. Nothing, she said. Mr. Beck said there's no exchange. He said this is a correction. A correction. His word. He said. SEOUL checked her notes, not because she needed to, but because she was precise. He said, she and her son are in this position because of a decision I made, specifically hiring someone I should have vetted more carefully. This is a correction, not a favor. Tell her that. Tanya stood in the middle of her small apartment and looked at the boxes SEOUL had already begun organizing and felt, against her very best efforts, something loosen slightly in her chest. Just slightly. Just barely. She was not going to let it loosen further. She was going to keep her eyes open and her bag packed. She was going to be smart. She was absolutely going to be smart. The new apartment was on the 14th floor. It had a window that looked out over the river and a kitchen with an oven that actually worked and a small study nook built into the wall that Treasure immediately and completely claimed. He put his Korean workbooks and his dinosaur backpack and 3 of his favorite smooth rocks from a collection he'd been building since he was 4 and declared it home with the certainty of a child who had decided, so that was settled. 2 weeks passed. Tanya worked. Treasure studied and asked questions and filled his notebook. She began to breathe more evenly. Then she made the mistake of running into Dong Hyan in the lobby. It was not dramatic. He was leaving a building meeting. She was arriving for a shift walkthrough. They turned the same corner at the same moment, and there was a half second of nothing, really. Just proximity. Just the awareness of it. Miss Ease, he said. Mr. Beck, she said. A pause. Is everything working? He asked. The apartment. The assignment. Yes. Everything is good. Thank you. And Treasure? She had not expected him to ask about Treasure specifically. She looked at him for a moment. He's claimed the study nook, she said. It now contains rocks. Something moved across his face, brief and real and quickly gone. He told me, the day we met, that he keeps rocks because they are older than everything and that makes him feel calm, he said. Tanya stared at him. He told you that? In the 4 minutes, Dong Hyan said. He said it simply without drama, but there was something underneath it, something that was not business, not correction, not arrangement. Something that was just a person, having remembered something a child told him because it was worth remembering. She didn't know what to do with that. She said goodbye. She went to her shift. She spent 45 minutes doing a walkthrough of the 4th floor and thinking about rocks and calm and what it meant that a man she barely knew had stored that information as carefully as she had. That evening, she told Treasure she'd seen Mr. Beck. Treasure looked up from his workbook. "How was his face?" he asked. "Still serious," she said. Treasure nodded slowly, as if confirming a theory. "I think that is not his real face," he said. "I think his real face is underneath, and it only comes out when he is not thinking about being careful." Tanya looked at her son. "When did you become a philosopher?" "I have always been a philosopher," Treasure said, and went back to his workbook. She was smiling before she could stop it. She let it sit there for a moment. Then she went and turned on the oven, the actual working oven, and started on dinner. The first crack in the arrangement happened on a Thursday. Tanya had been in the new role for exactly 3 weeks when SEOUL called her, not with her usual practical tone but with a careful, leveled one that meant she was managing something while she delivered it. "There has been a development," SEOUL said. "Mr. Beck wants to brief you himself. Can you come to Hagang Tower at 6? "What kind of development?" "He'll explain it better than I can," SEOUL said. Which was not like SEOUL at all. SEOUL explained things extremely well. Tanya went. Dong Hyen was in a different room this time. Not the round table room, but a larger space on the 10th floor with windows on 2 sides and a view of the city going amber in the early evening. He was standing when she came in. He didn't sit for a while, a sign. She had learned in these few weeks of careful observation that something was moving in his mind that hadn't settled yet. "One of the people connected to Yul Gawan's network recognized your face," he said. No preamble. He had learned quickly that she preferred no preamble. "A security camera feed from your previous building. They pulled it after Yul gave them Treasure's description." Tanya felt the familiar stillness settle over her. Her best defense and her oldest skill. "Do they know where I am now?"
No.
"But they know the industry. They will narrow it down." He looked at her directly. "I need to escalate what I'm doing to address this. But to do that effectively, I need your trust, your real trust, not your agreement because you had no choice trust. These are different things, and I can tell them apart." The room was quiet. Tanya looked at him for a long moment. "What's the difference to you?" she asked. "Between those two kinds?"
He thought about it.
Actually thought she could see it. "Agreement because you had no choice is when someone says yes with their mouth and is already planning their exit with their hands," he said. "Real trust is when someone says yes and then stays in the room. And you need me to stay in the room. I need you to let me explain everything I know, not just what's immediately relevant, so that you can make actual informed decisions instead of decisions based on incomplete information. Which is what you've had so far, because I was trying not to overwhelm you. That was a mistake. I should have known," he paused. "You don't want to be protected from information. You want all of it." Tanya sat down. She put her bag on the floor. "Tell me everything," she said.
He did.
It took 40 minutes. He told her about the network, not a traditional criminal organization but a group of businessmen who used borderline legal leverage and sabotage to destroy competitors and take market positions. He told her about the 3 previous attempts they had made to destabilize his operations. He told her about Yul Gawan, recruited 2 years ago, embedded carefully, and used for this one specific deal, which would have cost Dong Hyen not just money, but a partnership that had taken a decade to build. "Why that deal specifically?" Tanya asked. Dong Hyen was quiet for a moment. "Because it's the last piece," he said. "Once that partnership is secured, my position becomes difficult to challenge. There are people who would rather that not happen." "People from where you came from?" she asked carefully. Something in his face, already still, went one layer stiller. "You've been doing your own research," he said. Not accusingly. Almost approving. "I research everything," she said. "Especially things that are in my life." He nodded. "Yes," he said. "People from where I came from. I left that world. Some of it. A breath. Some of it has not fully accepted the leaving." She looked at him. She looked carefully, the way Treasure had taught her, eyes first, the underneath of it. What she found was not what she'd expected when she first heard his name and felt the weight of it. What she found was something that had been carrying something heavy for a very long time and had gotten very good at making it look weightless. Okay, she said. Okay. Okay, I trust you. The real kind. Not because you're charming, she said this plainly. You're not particularly charming. But because you told me when you were making decisions for my own good. And you noticed it was a mistake. And you changed it. He looked at her for a moment. No one has ever complimented me and insulted me in the same sentence before. I wasn't insulting you, she said. Charming is unreliable. Honest is better. Something happened in his expression that she didn't have a word for yet. Something that was quiet and unguarded and went away quickly, like a bird that lands and then thinks better of it. I'll arrange increased security, he said. Back to business. Back to the steadiness. For both of you. Treasure will not be aware of it. It won't change his day. He'll notice, Tanya said. He notices everything. Then we'll be honest with him, Dong Hyan said. At whatever level is appropriate. He's 7, Tanya said. But his appropriate level is significantly higher than most Tanyalts. I know, Dong Hyan said. Again, that tone. The one that said he had actually stored and considered the information about Treasure, had not filed it under Child, and closed the drawer. She went home. She put Treasure to bed. She sat in the kitchen with a cup of rooibos. She'd stopped wondering how the kitchen had been stocked with it, and thought about a man who had spent 15 years building perfect walls, and a boy with crayon on his thumb who had walked through all of them in 4 minutes, without even trying. She thought about what Beezy had asked her. The kind you run from, or the kind you run toward. She didn't run toward people. She had made that decision clearly, and kept it carefully. But she sat in the kitchen a long time before she went to bed. The next morning, Treasure came out of his study nook holding his Korean notebook and said, without looking up, my teacher says I should enter the district language competition. It is in 6 weeks.
Can I?
Of course you can, Tanya said. He looked up. Will we still be here in 6 weeks? She looked at him. This child, who noticed everything, who checked eyes, who asked the question underneath the question. Yes, she said. We will still be here. He nodded, satisfied. He went back to the notebook. She hoped, with a fierceness that surprised her, that she was right. She was going to do whatever it took to make sure she was right. The betrayal came from the place she hadn't looked. That was the thing about betrayal. It always came from the place you hadn't looked because you'd been so busy watching the door that you forgot about the window. Taesung was not the one who betrayed them. It was not SEOUL, whose loyalty was as straightforward as her organizational system. It was not anyone from the network, who were working from the outside, and had not yet found a way in. It was Young Pilsu, a man Dong Hyan had brought in 6 months earlier, a financial consultant who had impressed everyone with his numbers and his discretion and his ability to move money cleanly. A man Dong Hyan had trusted with the second layer, not the inner circle, but close enough to know the broad shape of things. Tanya didn't find out first. Dong Hyan found out first, at 11 o'clock on a Sunday night, through a chain of 3 phone calls that collapsed one after the other like something had pulled the thread. He called her immediately, not through Taesung, not through SEOUL, directly, the first time he'd ever used her number himself. I need you to wake Treasure, he said. And pack enough for 3 days. Someone will be at your door in 15 minutes. Tanya was already out of bed. She could hear it in his voice, not panic. Dong Hyan Baek was constitutionally incapable of panic, but urgency. The real kind. What happened? I had someone inside my operations that I didn't know about, he said. He's been feeding your location and Treasure's schedule to the network. For the past week. They have been building a timeline. Tanya was already moving to Treasure's room. Are they moving now? Not yet. But the window is narrow. A pause. I'm sorry. This should not have happened. My failure. Tell me later, she said. Talk me through what I need to do right now.
He did.
Clear, specific, sequential instructions. No assumptions, no shortcuts. She woke Treasure, who came awake instantly, because he was a child who slept lightly when things were unsettled, and things had been unsettled for a while, even if he hadn't said so. "We're going somewhere for a few days," she told him. She made her voice the steady one. Not frightened. Not falsely bright. Just steady. Treasure looked at her. He read her face. He said, "Is Mr. Beck helping?" "Yes." "Okay." He got up. He picked up his backpack, the dinosaur one, already half-packed, because Treasure always kept a half-packed ever since the first time they'd had to leave somewhere in a hurry, years ago, and he had learned that lesson without being told the one behind it. He added his notebook and 2 of his rocks. "Ready," he said. She stood in his doorway for 1 second, looking at her son, this extraordinary, careful, brave, small person, and felt the love for him so fully, it was almost physical. "Let's go," she said. Taesung was at the door in 13 minutes. There was a second car already in the street. They moved fast but without theater, the kind of movement that doesn't announce itself. In the car, Treasure sat with his backpack in his lap and looked out the window at the city passing in the dark. After a while he said, quietly, "Are the men who are looking for us dangerous?" Tanya looked at him. "Yes," she said. She did not lie to him about real things. "Is Mr. Beck going to stop them?" "He is working on it." Treasure was quiet for a moment. "His eyes are still not mean," he said. "Even when he is working on things. I think that means he is doing it for the right reason." Tanya looked out her own window. The city was moving past, amber and blue, familiar and enormous. "I think so too," she said. They were taken to a house in the hills, not large, not dramatic, but solid and removed and quietly beautiful in the way that places are when they have been chosen for function and turn out to also be lovely. There was a garden. There was a view. There were 2 security staff who introduced themselves and then stayed entirely outside, which SEOUL had apparently specified because she understood, without being told, that Tanya needed space to breathe. Dong Hyun arrived at the house 6 hours later. He looked, and this was the first time Tanya had seen this, tired. Not devastated, not broken, but worn. He had been working without stopping since the call. She could see the shape of it on him, and for the first time, she saw beneath the careful composure to the person who had been carrying it. He sat at the kitchen table. SEOUL put tea in front of him. He stared at it for a moment before picking it up. Treasure was asleep in the back room. Tanya was at the table too, across from him. "Young Pilsu," Dong Hyun said. He said the name like he was tasting something bitter. "He was referred to me by someone I have trusted for 8 years. Which means," he stopped. "Which means either your trust was misplaced or the referral was itself part of the plan," Tanya said. He looked at her. "Yes." "Which one do you think it is?" "I think," a pause. "A real one. Long and heavy. I think the 8 years was real. And I think at some point in those 8 years, someone found a way to apply pressure. And my friend, my contact, made a choice he thought was the smaller betrayal." He set his cup down. "That is the harder thing to absorb. The long betrayal. The one that was built slowly." Tanya was quiet for a moment. "I know about that kind," she said. He looked at her. She hadn't intended to say it, but it had come out cleanly, without preamble, the way honest things did when you stopped working to hold them back. She looked at the table. "Treasure's father," she said. He didn't leave suddenly. He left in increments. A little at a time. By the time it was clear what was happening, there was nothing left to save. She looked up. The gr Tanyal kind is harder, because you spend so long wondering if you read it wrong. Dong Hyun was very still. He was looking at her with the focused, complete attention that was, she had come to understand, his version of warmth. He didn't perform warmth. He gave attention, which was rarer and, she was finding, more powerful. "You didn't read it wrong," he said. "How would you know?" "Because people who read things wrong don't build what you've built," he said. "They either stay, or they collapse. You left and you built something else. That's not bad reading. That's accuracy, followed by courage." She looked at him for a long moment. Something was happening in the room that she was very aware of and had been carefully not naming. She named it now, privately, inside herself, where it couldn't do any immediate damage. She filed it away. She kept her eyes open.
The deal, she said.
The one treasure stop from going wrong. Is it still salvageable?
Yes.
The partnership wants to proceed. They were not involved in the sabotage, and they are as invested in the outcome as I am. He folded his hands on the table. I sign it in 4 days. If nothing else goes wrong. And the network? I'm addressing them through legal channels. Taesung is a small pause. Taesung is addressing them through other channels. Both simultaneously. Tanya almost smiled. Efficient. It's the only way. Treasure appeared in the kitchen doorway. He was in his pajamas, the ones with the small moons on them, and he was carrying one of his rocks, which he did sometimes when he woke up uncertain about where he was. He looked at the two of them at the table. He looked for a long time. You are having a serious conversation, he said. We are, Tanya agreed. Is it almost finished? Almost. Okay. He looked at Dong Hyun. Are you staying? Dong Hyun looked at Treasure. For tonight, he said. Treasure nodded, satisfied, and padded back to the room. Tanya and Dong Hyun sat in the kitchen for another hour. They didn't speak much. The quiet was the comfortable kind, the kind you only get when two people have moved past the performing stage and arrived somewhere more honest. Outside, the hills were dark and the sky was wide, and somewhere in the stillness, the thing that neither of them was naming settled itself into the space between them and waited, patient and certain, for the right moment. For days. All they needed was 4 days. They almost made it. The third day began normally. Tanya made breakfast. Treasure organized his workbooks and declared he was going to practice his Korean oral presentation because the competition was in 3 weeks and he intended to win. He stood in the middle of the small living room and delivered 4 paragraphs in Korean with the composure of someone who had been public speaking since birth, and Dong Hyun, who had come back to the house each of the 3 evenings, later each time, with more of the tiredness wearing off, listened from the doorway with an expression that was no longer carefully composed. His real face, Tanya thought. The one underneath. It was not a soft face. It was a face that had been through things, that had been shaped by decisions both good and regrettable, that had worn the weight of an industry and a past and a self-imposed isolation for a long time. But when he looked at Treasure delivering his Korean paragraphs in a moon-print pajama top and a pair of regular trousers with grass stains on the knees, the face became present. Genuinely present. She loved her son so completely that there was no room left for doubt about this. At 2 in the afternoon, SEOUL called with a tone Tanya now recognized, the leveled, managed one.
There's been movement, she said.
The network made contact with someone at the partnership's legal team. They're trying to delay the signing with a procedural challenge. It's minor, but it's real. Mr. Beck needs to go into the city. Dong Hyun left within the hour. He didn't say much. He checked the house security, spoke to both outside staff, and then stood near the door for a moment with his jacket in his hand and looked at Tanya with that complete, focused attention. I'll be back before evening, he said. We'll be here, she said.
He left.
An hour later, Treasure said, Mummy, there is a car outside that was not there this morning. Tanya went to the window. Treasure was right. A dark car, parked off the curve of the drive where it was half hidden by the hedge. It had not been there when Dong Hyun left. She called Taesung. No answer. She called SEOUL. Don't go outside, SEOUL said immediately. I'm calling the security staff right now. Stay away from the windows. I'm getting Mr. Beck. Tanya pulled Treasure away from the window. She made her voice steady and her hands deliberate. Study nook, she told him. Get in. Take your backpack. Mummy. I know, she said. You know what I need from you right now. He looked at her. He was 7 years old, and he had his mother's face and his own uncommon understanding of the world, and he said, Stay small and stay quiet. And trust that you are handling it.
Go, she said. He went.
She stood in the kitchen, phone in hand, and waited. Outside, she could hear the security staff moving. There were sounds, quick, professional, and then quiet. And then Taesung's voice on her phone. It was a tale. They followed us from 3 days ago. We missed it. But it's handled. The car is gone. You're safe. Tanya stood at the kitchen counter for 30 seconds after he hung up. She breathed.
In, out, in, out.
Then she went to the study nook. Treasure was sitting in it with his backpack in his lap and his notebook open to a page of Korean vocabulary. He looked up. Done, he asked.
Done, she said.
He scooted over. The study nook was not large enough for two, but he made space the way he always did, and she sat beside him, and he leaned against her shoulder, and she looked at the Korean vocabulary in his notebook and said, very quietly, read me one. This one, he said, pointing. Gomawo. It means thank you, but in the casual way. The way you say it to someone you are comfortable with. She repeated it. He corrected her pronunciation. She tried again. He approved. Outside, the evening was arriving, slow and orange. And coming up the drive, she could see the headlights from where she sat, was a familiar car. Treasure saw it too. He sat up slightly. He came back before evening, he said. He said he would, Tanya said. Treasure considered this. He is a person who does what he says, he said, with a 7-year-old simplicity and a 7-year-old's absolute accuracy. Yes, Tanya said. He is. There are moments that do not announce themselves. They arrive quietly between the dramatic ones, while you are sitting in a study nook with your son, and the evening light is doing something remarkable with the hills, and someone you did not plan is walking up the drive carrying the careful weight of a person who has been choosing, slowly and without fanfare, to be different than what made him. This is one of those moments. Hold on to it. Treasure saved a deal with 4 words and 17 numbers. Tanya survived things nobody should have to survive, and built something anyway. And Dong Hyun Baek, who spent 15 years being certain that the walls were the safest thing, is about to find out what happens when the right person stops treating them like walls and starts treating them like a door. The deal is tomorrow. The danger is not finished. And one of them is going to say something true that cannot be unsaid. You are not ready for what comes next. But you're going to love it. Subscribe and come back for batch 6. The morning of the signing, Tanya woke up before sunrise. She lay still for a while, looking at the ceiling, and felt the shape of the last 4 weeks, the movement, the fear, the rooibos tea, the round table, the eyes she had checked and kept checking, the study nook, the rocks, the vocabulary lesson in the dark. She got up. She made tea. She stood at the kitchen window and watched the hills go from black to gray to a tentative, early gold. Dong Hyun appeared in the kitchen doorway at 6. He had not slept well. She could see it, but not in a broken way, more like a man who had been thinking through the night instead of resting through it. You should eat something before you go, she said. I will. He came to the counter. He stood near her, not intrusively, just close, the way the kitchen was close when 2 people occupied it simultaneously. How are you? I'm good, she said. Then, I'm nervous. For you. For the signing. He looked at her. The procedural challenge was dismissed last night, he said. The signing is clean. It should go smoothly. Should. In my line of work, he said, should is as close to certain as things get. She turned to look at him. They were close enough that she could see clearly the face that was underneath the careful one, the one that Treasure had theorized about, the one that only came out when he stopped thinking about being careful.
It was out now.
He wasn't thinking about being careful. He was just standing in a kitchen in the early morning with tea in his hand and something that had been building for 4 weeks sitting right there between them, patient and inevitable. When this is finished, he said, and his voice was quieter than usual, which was already quiet, I would like to tell you something. Not while there is still danger around you. Not while the situation is complicated. After. Tell me now, she said. He looked at her. Tanya. After 4 weeks of being protected and moved and adjusted and arranged, she said, I would like one thing to happen on my schedule. Tell me now. A long pause. The hills outside were gold now, properly gold, and the light was coming in sideways and something enormous was happening in this ordinary kitchen. I have been careful, he said. For a very long time. About everything. About people specifically. Careful is another word for closed sometimes. I know that. I have known it. I thought it was the right way. I thought the cost of being open was too high given. He stopped. He started again. given where I came from and what I had to do to get out of it. She didn't say anything. She let him have the space. Your son walked into my meeting and said 4 words, Dong Hyan said. And something moved. Not because he saved my money or my deal. Because he was not afraid of me. And you were not afraid of me. Not the real kind of afraid. You were cautious, which is wisdom, but you were not diminished. You stood in front of me, and you were entirely yourself. He looked at her. Do you know how rare that is? In my life, in the life I have, do you know how few people? I think I do, she said quietly. I am not good at this, he said. At saying things like this. I don't have practice. I've been closed long enough that the opening of it is awkward.
It's not awkward, she said.
It feels awkward.
It feels real, she said.
That's different. He looked at her for a moment. Then, I don't want you to be in my life because I am keeping you safe. I want you to be in my life because you choose to be. Tanya held her cup of tea with both hands. She looked at him. Fully, completely, the eye check that she had learned to trust even when she was scared of what it showed her. What she found was not the clothes thing. What she found was what lived behind it. A person who had been building walls so long he had forgotten they were a choice. A person who, in 4 weeks and 1 extraordinary 7-year-old, had remembered. I am not easy, she said. I have a son who will read your personality in 40 seconds and tell me about it. I keep my bag packed for the first 6 months of everything. I research people. I ask too many questions. I trust slowly, and I need honesty the way other people need air. I know, he said. You know 3 weeks of me. I know enough, he said. I know you teach your son to check eyes. I know you left a bad thing instead of surviving it. I know you say Gamawo in the wrong tone and don't mind being corrected. Something in his expression shifted, that near smile, the one that was the memory of smiling. I know you keep rooibos with honey. I know that when you are thinking hard, you hold your cup with both hands. I know that your son carries rocks because they are older than everything, he stopped. And you told him that is why they are calming. He didn't come up with it alone. That is your philosophy. You just let him say it. She stared at him. Am I wrong? He asked. She looked down at her cup. Both hands. She looked up. No, she whispered. You're not wrong. The morning light was doing something extraordinary now. Neither of them moved. The moment sat between them, solid and warm and enormous. I have to go sign a contract, Dong Hyan said. I know. And then come back, she said. And she stopped. She tried again. We'll figure out what slowly looks like. For both of us. He looked at her. And then, properly, fully, not the memory of it but the real thing, he smiled. It changed his face. Not dramatically, not broadly, but genuinely. It was a face that had been serious and careful and capable for so long, and now, for one moment, in an early morning kitchen with the hills going gold outside, it was simply warm. Okay, he said. He left 40 minutes later. Taesung was at the door. The drive was clear and quiet. Tanya stood at the kitchen window and watched the car go, and then she went to wake Treasure. He was already awake, sitting cross-legged in his study nook, his Korean notebook in his lap, his rocks arranged by size on the shelf above him. He looked up at her. He smiled this morning, Treasure said. Matter of fact.
Certain.
You were asleep, Tanya said. I heard it, Treasure said, with the absolute confidence of a child who has decided that some things do not require seeing. Tanya sat on the edge of his bed. She looked at her son. She thought about all the choices. The one that had broken something. The ones she had made carefully and slowly and alone in the years after. The one that had brought them here, to this hill house, to this morning, to a man who had memorized the philosophy inside a 7-year-old's rock collection. Treasure, she said. Are you happy here? He considered it. He looked at his rocks. He looked at his notebook. He looked at her face. Yes, he said. This feels like the right place. Does it feel like the right place to you? I think so, she said. I'm still checking. That's okay, he said, very gently. I'll help you check. She laughed, The real kind, the quick kind, the kind that came out before she could manage it. She pulled him into a hug that he allowed for approximately 7 seconds before announcing he needed to practice his oral presentation. She let him practice. She listened. His Korean was remarkable, genuinely remarkable, and she was not being a biased mother, she simply knew what she was hearing. When he finished, he looked at her expectantly.
Gamuo, she said.
He corrected her pronunciation. She tried again.
He approved.
The signing went through at 11:14 in the morning. Tanya knew because SEOUL sent her a message, not a detailed one, just 2 words. It's done. She sat with those 2 words for a while. She made Treasure lunch. She helped him with a math problem that was not actually difficult for him, but that he liked to talk through with her anyway, she suspected, because it was a way to spend time together that felt normal and ordinary. She loved him so much for knowing that she needed normal and ordinary right now. Dong Hyun came back at 4. He didn't say much. They didn't need much at this point. They had moved past the stage where much was required. He sat at the kitchen table and Treasure immediately appeared from the study nook and began telling him about the oral competition and the tonal patterns in formal Korean versus casual Korean and the 3 words he had learned that had no good English translation, which he found philosophically interesting. Dong Hyun listened. Fully. Without his phone. Without a divided attention. He asked questions, real questions, the kind that required Treasure to think, not just report. And Treasure, who had been talked at all his life by Tanyalts who thought listening to him was a courtesy rather than a conversation, lit up like someone had turned a switch. Tanya watched from the counter. Later, Treasure in bed, the house quiet, the night coming down over the hills. Tanya and Dong Hyun sat on the small porch and looked at the city lights below, which were so far away and so bright they looked like a second sky upside down. The network, she said eventually. Is it over? The legal channels are in motion, he said. It will take time, months, probably. But the threat to you, to Treasure, that is over. I can tell you that with certainty. And Young Pilsu? A pause. He made a choice under pressure, Dong Hyun said. I understand the pressure. I don't forgive the choice. But I understand it. Your contact, the one who referred him. We spoke, he said. It was a difficult conversation. I think we may not recover what was there before. But there is honesty now, which is sometimes what's left after trust breaks and you both decide not to walk away from the damage. Sometimes that's enough, Tanya said. To stay and look at the damage together. He turned to look at her. Yes, he said. Sometimes it is. The city lights were very still below them. The night was warm. I'm not moving back to the old apartment, she said. Not as a declaration. More as a statement of fact that she was releasing into the air to see how it sounded. Not because I'm afraid. Because I don't want it anymore. I want, she stopped. She tried again. Treasure wants a proper garden for his rocks. He told me last week. He wants a space where he can add to the collection without running out of shelf. Dong Hyun was quiet for a moment. The building I manage on the east side has garden units, he said carefully. There are 2 available. No obligation attached. If I move into one of your managed properties, then we make it official that it's a normal tenancy at market rate, with nothing connected to me personally, he said immediately. So that you are living there because you chose it. Not because you were placed there. She looked at him. You already thought about this. I think about most things in advance, he said. It is a professional habit. You thought about my son's rock collection. A pause. Yes. She laughed softly. Then she grew quiet again and looked out at the upside-down sky and felt the shape of this. All of it, the whole 4 weeks. The danger and the fear and the steadiness and the mornings, and the way a smile had changed a face, and the way honesty was better than charming, and the way 2 people who had both spent a long time being very carefully alone had somehow, in the middle of a crisis neither of them had planned, ended up sitting on a porch together, looking at the same lights. Slowly, she said. Slowly, he agreed. And honestly. Always. She nodded. The night was wide and warm. Somewhere inside the house, a 7-year-old with a backpack of rocks and a Korean vocabulary notebook slept peacefully, dreaming whatever it is that children dream when they feel, for the first time in a while, that where they are is where they are supposed to be. And on the porch, two people who had both taken the long, difficult road to honesty sat together in the particular warmth of a beginning. Not the loud kind, not the dramatic kind, but the real kind. The kind that holds. The kind that stays. 2 months later, Daryl Ease placed first in the district language competition. His acceptance speech, delivered in Korean, included one sentence that his teacher would talk about for years. Language is a door. When you learn someone else's language, you're saying, I want to come through. Dong Hyun-baek was in the audience. He had the real face on the whole time. Thank you for sticking with us to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you'll surely enjoy the other stories on our playlist. They're even more amazing and interesting. Click on the images showing on your screen right now to watch the next video. Hit that like and subscribe button now so as to never miss out on any stories.